Friendly reminder that today's panel is a nonpartisan panel and intended to offer information that you can use to make your own decisions when voting. And so, as such, we'll do our best to keep the space civil, balanced, and productive. And we ask for your help with that and appreciate you all for being here in that spirit. So, our first speaker today is Nicolas Heidorn. Nicolas joined the University of the Pacific McGeorge School of Law as an assistant professor of law and public policy in 2025. His teaching and research focuses on state and local policymaking and governance, electoral systems, campaign finance, and government ethics. He brings over 2 decades of experience advancing ethics, governance, and democratic reform across California at both state and local levels. Before joining McGeorge School of Law, Professor Heidorn served as executive director of Oakland's Public Ethics Commission, where he led the enforcement of the city's campaign finance, lobbying, and ethics laws. He previously served as chief consultant and staff director to the California State Elections Committee of the Senate, and there he oversaw review of elections and campaign finance bills, advised the committee and legislative leadership. Earlier in his career, he was public and legal director for California Common Cause and directed the organization's legislative campaigns for voting rights, ethics, and governance reform. In 2016, Professor Heidorn partnered with California Common Cause to launch the California Local Redistricting Project. That project concluded in 2018 and conducted research and promoted best practices for local redistricting and provided the technical assistance for cities and counties pursuing reform as well as state legislation. Thank you, Professor Heidorn.
Thank you all so much for having me, and thank you to the local league for sponsoring this. I'm just such a admirer and believer in the work that the league does. So thank you for the role you play across the state and the country, helping to educate people on their voting options. So today I will be presenting the first unit of our presentation, which is on Redistricting 101. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is redistricting, why does it matter, and a little bit of the history in California for how we got to where we're at today. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Oh, if the PowerPoint will work. First, is it sharing? Can I get a nod from my panelists if it's sharing? Great. All right, so what is redistricting? To start with, when you think of elections, if you think of elections for Congress, state legislature, state Senate, state assembly, they're all elected by district. What that means is not everyone in the state gets to vote on every single member of Congress, every single state legislator. You have a district for your area, and only the people in that district get to vote on them, and then you elect them, and that's, of course, your representative. So a lot of election systems are based on districts. And when you have districts, you eventually need to redistrict them, which is to redraw them. So redistricting is the process of redrawing election district boundaries to ensure that they remain equal in population. And it applies at all levels of government. So if you have a city council that has city council districts, or if you look at Congress or state legislature, all of those districts need to be redistricted. And according to US Supreme Court precedent, that needs to happen at least once every 10 years. So redistricting is the redrawing of those district boundaries, and it needs to happen every 10 years. So why do we redistrict? Let's think a little bit about the process for why we are even going through this exercise. Now, of course, the main thing is to get equal population districts. And when you think about it, every 10 years, there's going to be changes in populations to districts. People may move into a district. People may move out of a district. There may be higher births in certain districts or greater deaths in others. So over time, district population, even if it started equal, will get very imbalanced. And so redistricting is the process of looking at what the current population spread is based on the US Census, and then redrawing those boundaries so you have equal population. But more fundamentally, the reason why we do that comes to this concept of one person, one vote. This is a constitutional principle where the idea is we want everyone to have equal voting power. We don't want some people to have kind of more representation than others. And so ensuring that the population is equal means that everyone essentially has the same claim to a representative. Nobody's being kind of overrepresented. I'll give an illustration to kind of explain what that means. Imagine for a moment that Los Angeles County, our biggest county in the state, which has 10 million people, imagine they only got one representative in the state Senate, the California State Senate. And then imagine that our three lowest population counties, Mono, Inyo, and Alpine, total population just 33,000. Imagine they also got one representative. If we expanded that system throughout the state, so almost each county gets a representative, what you'd have is the huge, highly populated areas would be completely underrepresented compared to the rural areas. Someone who votes in a low population area would have way more of an ability to sway the election, way more of an ability to get their representative to listen to them if they're only one of a few thousand versus if they're one of millions. And so that disconnect in size is one of the reasons why we do redistricting. Now, this example I gave you maybe seems a little farcical, but that's actually how we used to do it up until the 1960s. So it used to be up until 1960 that LA, because they'd only get one representative, and rural counties, a few of them would each get one representative, meant that the voting power in LA was 450 times less voting power. Your ability to affect change in an election was 450 times less than it was in a rural area. So that fundamental kind of democratic disconnect is why the Supreme Court announced the one person, one vote standard. And that's why we have to do it every 10 years to ensure that everyone has about equal voting power by equalizing the population. But there's also kind of another broader goal. So equal population being the first goal. The second goal of redistricting is to try and create fair representation for all communities. So when you think about why we have districts again, why we don't just elect everyone at large in the state, it's the idea that we want all corners of the state to have a voice, to have their perspective represented. That's why we create districts. But then it becomes important that you create districts that still organically represent real communities. Because otherwise, if you just drew like horizontal bars as your districts across the state. You'd have highly urban areas, highly rural areas where they'd have almost nothing in common. And then the person they elect would just represent whoever had the most votes. So maybe the urban areas would dominate, or the rich areas would dominate, and they'd kind of ignore the rest of the areas. So by creating districts, you try and create cohesive districts that really represent communities to ensure that everyone will have a voice in your legislative body. So that's kind of the ideal of redistricting. That's the goal of it, equal population, but also the sense that we're trying to create true representation, fair representation. Now, if that's the goal, we don't always achieve the goal. So there's another thing called gerrymandering, and I'm here to tell you gerrymandering is as old as redistricting. So gerrymandering is the process of manipulating these election district boundaries. So using redistricting to manipulate election district boundaries to give a party, a faction, or a demographic an unfair election advantage. So this could be Democrats drawing the lines to disenfranchise Republicans, Republicans drawing lines to disenfranchise Democrats. You've also seen gerrymandering done to depress minority representations, gerrymandering to fracture the Latino vote so they can't elect someone, fracture the African American vote. So gerrymandering is the manipulation to try and suppress fair representation to gain an unfair advantage for a demographic or a political party. And it gets its, and again, I was saying it's very old. So to give you an example, in 1812, the governor of Massachusetts, a guy named Elbridge Gerry, signed new election districts in Massachusetts to benefit his party, the Democratic Republican Party. And you see here a cartoon, which was from a Massachusetts newspaper, describing how he'd kind of drawn these torturous districts to split different communities and to grab the voters that he wanted so that he could gain majority of the vote. And they said these districts looked like salamanders. So it eventually came to be called Gary's salamander, which eventually became the gerrymander that we know today. But the main point is gerrymandering has always been around because the power of how you draw lines can have such an impact on representation. So that ability to misuse redistricting becomes a huge temptation for politicians who are the ones that usually get to draw the lines themselves. So they get to draw their own districts. So the temptation to abuse it is quite high. Now, today, of course, we can gerrymander with much more sophistication than we used to be able to because we have computers and data sets and the ability to precisely map out people's voting power down to the block level. So there's a guy named Thomas Hoffeller who's passed away a few years ago, but for decades he was the chief architect of redistricting for Republicans, and he was known for doing extremely aggressive Republican gerrymanders. And he used to say, I define redistricting as the only legalized form of vote stealing left in the United States today. That's because how you draw the lines can have an even bigger impact on the outcome than how people vote if they're drawn unfairly. So let's talk about that. We've talked about how gerrymandering can be unfair, it can lead to weird representational issues, but how does this actually happen? So the gerrymanderer's toolkit has two main tools, cracking and packing. Cracking is when you try and split your opponent's voters into as many different districts as possible, so they're so diluted that they can't win any districts. Packing is the opposite strategy. Packing, you take all your opponent's voters and you try and squish them all together into just as few districts as you can, but they'll be over concentrated in that district, so you win all the remaining districts where they're not packed. And you can cause some real distortions in representation that way. So let me give you an example. Let's pretend we have a political community, it's be a state or a city, wherever you're doing redistricting, that has 40% green households and, or sorry, 40% purples and 60% green households. Purple and green could represent anything. Again, you can have racially discriminatory gerrymandering, or you could have partisan. So these colors could represent races or they could represent political parties, but the important point is seeing how you can fracture groups' political powers. So with 40% purple, 60% green, all else being equal, you'd probably assume that the purple side will win about 40% of the seats and the green side will win about 60% of the seats. But if green is drawing the lines, if green has control over the line drawing process, they might decide to maximize their gains by using a tactic called cracking. So what they might do is they might split all the districts up. So in every single district, green has a majority and purple is a minority. So green will win every single district. So consequently, green wins 5 out of the 5 seats, 100% of the seats. Now let's take a look at another situation. Let's pretend this time that purple has control over the line drawing process. They are in the minority, but they want to get control of the legislative body. They're going to use a tactic called packing. They're going to push all the green people into 2 districts as tightly as they can concentrate them. And then their voters can win the remaining districts. And so they get 60% of the representation. They win 3 out of 5 seats, 60% of the representation. They control the legislative body, even though they're functionally a minority of the whole electorate. So it really goes to show you the power that you can have with redistricting if it's being done for malicious purposes. So shifting from the abstract to California, we have a long history of gerrymandering in the Golden State. So California, up until 2010, like most other states, the legislature drew its own lines. So it would draw its own lines for state assembly and state senate, and it would draw the lines for Congress. But usually the members of Congress of their party would tell them, hey, here's how I want you to draw the lines. So in 1980, we had an aggressive Democratic partisan gerrymander because the Democrats controlled the legislature. You got these torturous districts with little tentacles dripping out into different areas to grab voters here and there to enable the Democrats to win 6 more seats, a huge increase just by redrawing the districts and forcing out longtime incumbents. The architect of the plan is largely considered to be Congressman Phil Burton, and when he was called on it, he once said, "This is my contribution to modern art, the jigsaw of puzzle pieces that he'd drawn with the districts." So fast forward 10 years, there's a deadlock. The legislature isn't able to draw the lines, and a court draws the lines in California. So it's one of the fairest redistrictings in California history, one of the most competitive decades. In fact, party control of the legislature flips back and forth in the 1990s because the districts were so competitive. Fast forward again 10 years, and this time the Democrats who are still in control decide rather than try and maximize gains, they just want nobody to lose their seats. They're going to lock in the Democratic majority, but they're not going to try and take down Republicans because they don't want the Republicans to legally challenge their maps. So you get what's called a bipartisan gerrymander. Both sides agree to gerrymander it to prevent competition, and it works incredibly. Out of 265 congressional elections that decade, only 2 elections did a seat change party hands. So they'd drawn the districts to be so overwhelmingly Democrat, so overwhelmingly Republican, it was almost impossible for any seats to switch hands. Schwarzenegger later becomes governor, and he quips that there was more turnover in the Habsburg monarchy than there was in California's elections. So monarchies are more stable than our democracy in terms of shifting of who's in power. And he promised that he was going to terminate gerrymandering. So that takes us closer to the current day. So you get a campaign that forms, coalition of good government groups, Schwarzenegger, Republicans, and they put forward Proposition 11. And Proposition 11 is an attempt to move redistricting out of the legislature, instead put it in an independent commission. One of the findings of Prop 11 is allowing politicians to draw their own districts is a conflict of interest that harms voters. There's a big fight over this proposition, but it narrowly passes by 51% of the vote. The very next year, the legislature puts a measure on the ballot, Proposition 27, to eliminate the commission. Then the proponents of the commission put a countermeasure on the same ballot, Proposition 20, to extend the legislature, the commission, from not just drawing legislative seats, but also drawing congressional districts. The voters ultimately reject the repeal of the commission, and they agree to the extension. So that gets us to where we're at today, where we have an independent commission that is responsible for drawing state senate, state assembly, and congressional districts. It forms for the first time in 2011, and its first maps are used in 2012, and then it goes forward to draw our current set of maps, which it did in 2022. The brief outline of the commission, because this is part of the Prop 50 debate, is that it was intended to prevent gerrymandering in all forms. And it did this through three methods: through process protections, transparency protections, and criteria protections. So very briefly, in terms of process, what they said is, we don't want any party to dominate. So we're going to have a balanced commission, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, 4 independents. And we're not going to allow political insiders to appoint them. We're going to have an open application process where any member, any person in the state can apply. It's going to be really strict criteria who's there. There'll be a vetting process. And ultimately you end up with this board of commissioners. And to pass a map, all 3 of those subgroups have to agree to it. At least a majority of the Republicans, majority of the Democrats, and majority of the independents, to make it so no political faction can overwhelm the other with a gerrymandered map. In terms of transparency protections, it used to be that with redistricting, you get maps drawn behind closed doors. It would just pop up and then you'd vote on them. Well, instead, now the maps are drawn in public. There's no ex parte communication. That means the commissioners aren't allowed to have little side conversations of, how do you think I should draw the maps? All the testimony on the maps has to be out in public. And then the last protection is with the criteria. The criteria expressly prohibit partisan gerrymandering. And they also have ranked criteria of what the commission is supposed to accomplish that emphasizes what is really the true fair goal of redistricting, which is keeping communities together. So that was the commission they created. And the general assessment from academics, as well as the good government community, is that the commission worked as it did. It effectively was nonpartisan, eliminated intentional gerrymandering, led to very competitive elections in the 2010s, and it was a transparent process. And the more analysis has been done, comparing our commission, other independent commissions, and legislature, there's virtually consensus amongst academics and the reform community that independent commissions work far better at eliminating gerrymandering than when the politicians control the process themselves. So we've got California, but of course there's a larger context that you'll hear about with Prop 50. And so to give you a brief taste of that larger context, this reform that California was a real pioneer on has percolated elsewhere, but in some senses it's kind of stalled a little bit. You see commissions, particularly in the West and in large, mostly Democrat-controlled states, and it has had less success, particularly in like the South or Southern states, in penetrating. So California has an independent commission, New York does, New Jersey, Michigan. So a lot of the bigger, more democratic states have passed independent redistricting. But if you think of the larger Republican states, Texas, Florida, they're still mostly legislatively controlled redistricting. So the politicians control that line drawing process. There were attempts to do a national solution. So in 2022, there was a bill in Congress that would have prohibited partisan gerrymandering, required every state to set up an independent commission. Passed the House, had majority support in the Senate. President Obama likely would have signed it, but it was filibustered, and so the bill died. So there's no federal legislation. Every state can come up with their own process. California can create independent commissions. Texas can just have the legislature do it. There was also, you may be thinking to yourself, well, surely just this blatant gerrymandering must be unconstitutional. And if that's your view, the answer is the courts will not save us. There was a case, Rucho versus Common Cause, horrible partisan gerrymander in North Carolina, went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said it may be distasteful. It may look like we're partisan redistricting is discriminating against voters based on who they politically support, but it's non-justiciable, meaning the courts can't offer a remedy. So what Roberts said is partisan gerrymandering claims present political questions beyond the reach of the federal courts. That decision, more than anything else, poured gasoline on the fire of gerrymandering because it used to be people tried to try and hide that they were doing partisan gerrymandering. There was the threat that the Supreme Court was going to make it illegal. But at this point, the Supreme Court has given a green light to partisan gerrymandering. So you're seeing more and more aggressive partisan gerrymandering in every state. And that leads us to where my story will stop, and I will pass you off to our next speaker, and that's the redistricting wars of 2025. What you're seeing now is a sudden attempt mid-cycle for everyone to redraw their lines to extract maximum partisan advantage for their political party. And so you've seen that in Texas, most recently, passing a very pro-Republican gerrymander in that state. And that leads us to the conversation of whether California should stick to its nonpartisan process or follow suit. And so with that, I'll conclude and pass it over to Angelina to explain Prop 50, which is kind of the culmination of this battle within the California context. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you so very much. Appreciate that. Um, I will shift our spotlight in just a moment, but let me go ahead and introduce our second speaker, who is Angelina Reyes. Thank you. Um, hmm, Interesting format. Hang on one second, folks. We'll let me just change our spotlight for one second. I can do that. There we go. Um, there we go. Okay. Um, so, Nicholas, I think you are still sharing your oh no, that's Lonnie. Okay, great. So, Angelina Reyes is a retired municipal clerk whose career reflects nearly 2 decades of public service. As city clerk for the city of Hayward, she was responsible for maintaining official municipal records, overseeing election administration, supporting the legislative work of the city council, and ensuring compliance with open government and public access requirements. A member of the International Institute of Municipal Clerks, Ms. Reyes mentored current and emerging city clerks and earned a reputation for steadfast commitment to transparency and public engagement. Since retiring from city government, Ms. Reyes has remained deeply involved in civic life and community leadership. She currently serves as co-president for the League of Women Voters of Fremont, Newark, and Union City, and she also volunteers with the Hispanic Community Affairs Council, which is a nonprofit organization that provides scholarships to Hispanic and Latino youth in Alameda County. There, she has served in multiple leadership roles, including scholarship chair, vice president, and president. In addition to her volunteer work, Angelina continues to support community-based organizations by providing technical expertise in governance, assisting nonprofits with updating bylaws and organizational policies. Through her decades-long commitment to public service and civic engagement, Ms. Reyes has built strong community connections and continues to champion accessible, transparent, and participatory local government. Thank you, Ms. Reyes.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. I'm amazed. I just want to share what I've learned about Proposition 50, but first a little bit about our ballots. The Secretary of State has requested the counties begin sending out our all-mail ballot election, a special election this time around, and they should be going out October 6th. And some may have already received their ballots in the mail. And we must remember that the return postage is free, and there are 24-hour drop boxes that will be opening up pretty soon. And so there are various ways to return your ballot. And if you're not registered, there we can go up to election day and vote provisionally until we can supply all the information that verifies you as a California voter. So as you mail back your ballot, the next slide will show us how you can track your mail-in ballot with ballot tracks. And that's something that the Secretary of State's office in the state of California provide. And you can't change your voter registration on that. But it will, once you mail in your ballot, it will send you emails or texts, what you prefer, where your ballot is. So it's a good piece of information to have. And if you desire, you can photo that with your phone and keep that for reference. By now, you should have received two pieces of information one from the Secretary of State, the official voter guide for the special election on November 4th, and then something from the County of Alameda that has our sample ballot. And we not only have Proposition 50, but we also have in my area, in some districts called the Washington Hospital Healthcare District, we have a ballot measure as well called Measure B. So those two pieces of information, and perhaps you might also receive a postcard, and that postcard clarifies a very slight typo on page 11 of uh, sample ballot from the state. I believe there are two labels for districts with the same two districts with the same label 22, District 22, and another district should be District 27 on page 11 of that sample ballot. And you can see that there are in other pages 22 and 27, two distinct districts, but just for your information. So we go on to the next slide. And how do we work? The League of California does not support or oppose any candidates or any political parties. No, we are encouraging voters to be informed by the presentations that we give that are neutral, that are nonpartisan. We encourage an informed and active participation in government. We work to increase the understanding of major public policies and issues through education. And we want to influence through our advocacy and public policy. Next slide, please. Let's see, our next slide. A little bit about evaluating ballot measures. Sometimes it's necessary to read the ballot title, and do you agree with the goals of the ballot measure or the ballot proposition? Is it easy to understand? Does it mandate spending with no money budgeted for it? Does it amend the Constitution? And this proposition does amend the Constitution. And remember that campaign literature is not neutral nor always factual. So the one important thing is who is funding the measure. And so we need to check a transparency portal put on by the state of California called the Fair Political Practices Commission. And the website is on this slide as well as in another slide as we go forward. So we just want to hope and encourage good government through all of the resources that we can provide to our voters. The next slide provides nonpartisan election information. Impartial resources endorsed by the League of Women Voters. The state of California provides the Legislative Analyst's Office, and the Cal Access is another important website, and then again, Fair Political Practices Commission. The League of Women Voters also has sites, Vote 411, 411, and the Education Fund of the State of California, which is cavotes.org. And then, of course, your local leagues. We have the Eden Area League, and then the league that I'm from, the League of Women Voters for Fremont, Newark, and Union City. And our members who have provided a team to develop these slides include Rita Manning and Susan Neiman, who have dug deep to get all the information accurate and factual. So thank you. The next slide is the overview of Proposition 50. an Assembly Constitutional Amendment number 8, amending Article 21 and adds Section 4, temporary redistricting. Next slide, please. And the next slide, I think we can say that, here we go. The background is perfect. California has 52 districts. District lines are usually drawn every 10 years, as was stated in the previous presentation, through the census. Voters choose one representative every 2 years for their district. And the current Proposition 50 congressional district maps, new legislative drawn maps, are going to be used, if this passes, for congressional elections starting in 2026, which will cover 2028 and 2030. Next slide, please. So, as was previously said, voters passed Proposition 11 in 2008, and in 2010, the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, which includes 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 4 not registered in either one of those parties, to develop and design the district maps. And they are required to follow federal and state laws. And state law requires that they don't split up neighborhoods or local communities, even cities, and it prohibits considering political parties or politicians that are in office or people running for office when it draws the maps. Next slide, please. We can pass this one. We had information on that. Thank you. And then the redistricting map. And you can find that on this website that has all of the maps that are the districts from our that will be temporary until 2030. And so this is a response to what was happening in Texas, that was being directed by President Trump to call all Republican-led states to undertake this unprecedented mid-decade redistricting of congressional seats. And one of the titles for the proposed amendment to Article 21 is Election Rigging Response Act. So it's in response to what Texas is doing and in other states that are Republican-led. But part of the Proposition 50 also includes encouraging a policy to the Congress of the United States to support the use of fair, independent, and nonpartisan redistricting commissions nationwide. Next slide, please. So California is calling on the United States to pass a federal legislation that amends the United States Constitution to require the use of fair, independent, and nonpartisan redistricting commissions. So this redistricting map is the area in southern Alameda. I'm not sure if it includes Hayward or not, but this is a redistricting map, and there is calmatters.org where you can type in your address, I believe, and you are able to see your district, our district. So Hayward is included in this one. Great. So the next slide is what your vote means. If you vote yes, the state would use a new legislative drawn congressional district map for 2026 through 2030. And the Citizens Redistricting Commission will redraw congressional districts starting in 2031 after the census. A no vote means keeps the existing congressional district maps in place, and it will be in place through 2030. Again, thank you. Next map, slide, please. Next map. So the one-time cost for the counties is a few $1 million statewide. They need to redraw their maps and the various duties that belong to that. And the state is approximately $200,000. Now, one-time cost, this amount is less than 1% of the state's roughly $220 billion in its general fund budget. And so that is where the money will come, the $200,000, and that comes straight out of the legislative analyst's office. Next slide, please. Supporters of this redistricting proposition say stop Trump from rigging the 2026 election. Trump and Texas Republicans are making a power grab to steal congressional seats for the 2026 election. And it ensures that 2026 midterm elections are conducted on a level playing field. These maps are temporary and expire in 2030, and it keeps more cities and counties combined and communities together than the existing maps that we have. So those are some of the reasons that supporters say, and they also say, next slide, it protects democracy in all 50 states. Thank you. And it has a duty to defend democracy. The nation is in protecting voter rights and fair elections and calls for a nationwide commitment to fair and impartial maps. And it gives the voters the ability to approve the district lines for this election and the next several congressional elections. And it keeps California a leader in fair elections by preserving its independent redistricting system. Next slide, please. So the opponents are saying and say they put politicians in charge, that this proposition puts the politicians in charge, and they're drawn their own districts or those of their friends. It removes requirements to keep cities, counties, and local communities together. It splits counties 114 times and sites 141 times, far more, and cities, sorry, far more than the city's citizen drawn maps. And it costs $200 million when the state is cutting funding to important programs. Next slide, please. Also, it repeals the landmark approved election reforms. From the 2008, voters approved that the CRC, the Citizens Redistricting Commission, and it replaces an open public process with backroom deals, and that it's not temporary. It sets a dangerous precedent, opening the door to drawing election maps beyond 2031. Next slide, please. So it's important to follow the money. And FPPC is a place where you can find out almost daily it changes who's funding in support of Proposition 50 and who is in opposition, as well as the Secretary of State must keep totals on the Secretary of State's website, and you can see the totals periodically change as well. So currently, 121,136,775 in support and 74,125,600. I hope I read that right. So you can see who are the major funders because there is a top of the list when you go to fppc.org.ca.gov. It is funded for policy reform. The Move On PAC and the California Teachers are the top three currently. And this is from September 26th, so it's increased somewhat since then. And then the opponents have funded Congressional Leadership Fund and the Charles T. Munger Jr., more than 30.1 million at this time. Next slide, please. So following the money is very important. This is an agency that was founded in 1974 by Proposition 9, and it has the top contributor lists that you can go to this website and see what is and who are funding both sides of this proposition. Fair Political Practices Commission is a California, state of California website. Next slide. I believe that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. Switch our spotlight and we'll move on to our next speaker. Thank you again. Oops. Now, 1 second. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So our third speaker today is RocQuel Johnson. She is a seasoned communications leader with over 22 years of experience in philanthropic, public relations, and government affairs initiatives. She currently serves as communication officer at the Blue Shield of California Foundation, where she develops and executes communication campaigns and supports grants to amplify the foundation's mission of promoting health equity for all Californians, and eliminating domestic violence. She also supports grantee communications across California's diverse communities. As an adjunct professor at St. Mary's College of California, Professor Johnson teaches a hybrid communications course. She equips working adults with essential skills in organizational communication. She also brings extensive experience from her role as branch chief of public information at Caltrans, where she led public relations efforts for major infrastructure projects within the 9 Bay Area counties. Ms. Johnson is also the founder of At the Red Door, a nonprofit supporting women of color. She further serves on several boards, including Parent Voices of Oakland and the Black Maternal Wellness Innovation Lab. She's also the newly appointed president of the Hayward South Alameda County chapter of BWAPA, Black Women Organized for Political Action. She has led efforts on voter engagement and voter rights over multiple election cycles and holds a Master of Arts degree in leadership with a social justice emphasis from St. Mary's College of California, as well as a Bachelor's of Science in Business Management from California State University, Fresno. Thank you, Professor Johnson.
Well, thank you so much. I was trying to figure out who is she talking about. So I'm going to gather myself here and slides. Let's see if I can get this right. I'm always on the struggle here. How to do my own slides. Let's see. Let's narrator. We'll start from the beginning. Okay, I think I got it going on now. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that wonderful opportunity to speak and also to be a part of the engagement process here. As Sarah mentioned, I am RocQuel Johnson, and I'm really here as the president of the Hayward South County chapter of Black Women Organized for Political Action, also known as BWAPA. And so I'll be talking about the tools and strategies for engagement, how to vote, why it matters, and how to stay informed. Let's see. I'll just want to tell you a little bit, though, about who BWAPA is. We are for more than 5 decades a organizing, training, and mobilizing voters across California organization. We work to increase representation and uplift of government. So our Hayward South County chapter serves cities like San Leandro, Castro Valley, Union City, and Fremont, as well as Dublin, Pleasanton, Livermore, places that were filled with people that are committed to change. And so our work is really about making sure everyone understands how powerful their vote really is, not just in the national elections, but essentially in the local ones that shape our day-to-day lives. And so I really wanted to stress that because a lot of times we get caught up in the national and don't recognize the importance of showing up in our local opportunities to vote. So we'll begin with why voting matters. Really, voting is more than a civic duty. It is how we express our priorities and hold decision makers accountable. Did you know that in some city council or school board elections, outcomes are really determined by fewer than could be 10 votes? And so that's why your vote really matters. Every vote matters because policies on housing, on safety, on education, on transportation, and healthcare are all start with elected officials who respond to the people they show up with. So when we don't vote, we are giving away our power and silencing our votes and our voices that should be shaping solutions for our communities. So it's really important to why our voting matters. We know that if we don't vote, we give away our power and silence voices that should be shaping solutions for our communities. And so this really talks about the importance of everyday elections, of showing how some of the local races are decided by those few votes, and that our lower voter turnout means low representation. So how do you vote? Voting made simple. Really, I think Miss Angela talked about that already, that your ballot is going to be mailed out, or if it hasn't already been done so, by Monday, tomorrow, the October 6th. So my first point to you would be check registration. And you can do that at the voterstatus.sos.ca.gov. And that is where you can check your voter registration. Also, you can vote 3 ways. First, mail it in. There's no postage necessary. Drop boxes. There are official county sites located everywhere. And then 3, in person. And you can vote at your voting centers or your polling places. And I want to stress that a lot of times we are noticing that our polling places are not where they used to be. I used to have a polling place down the street at a local church, and I could walk from my home down there. And the last election, I went down there and I was like, they're not voting here. So I had to jump online and find out that there are voting centers. And so what they've done is that they've eliminated a lot of the voting places, and now they've made centers. And I believe that there are maybe 19 to 20 centers. So you really have to determine before you go where you're going to vote. So that's really important. And then also, you can track your ballot step by step by using what they call ballot tracks. So you'll know when it's received and when we can go ahead and do other things with that. So let's see here. So here are some important election dates. As we know, election date is November the 4th. And here is an actual slide that talks about the actual date. So October the 6th, vote by mail ballots mailed to all active registered voters. Again, check your registration status. October the 7th, ballot drop-off boxes open and remain available until Election Day. October the 20th is the last day for eligible Californians to register to vote at register2vote.ca.gov. And then October the 25th, voting centers in 20 counties will be open early for in-person voting. And the last is get your ballots in the mail at least a few days before Election Day. And I want to stress that, because don't be like people I know who've waited for the last day to then try to run in the lines and try to put their ballot into the mail. So we get them early. We want to make sure that we sit down and we can look at our special election ballot here to help us to be clear as to what we're going to do. And then we can determine why and how we're going to vote. So again, remember, you have time. Don't wait to the last minute. Why these tools matter. We want to build confidence. We want to create convenience, and we want to do connection. And as I mentioned earlier, tools like ballot tracks and voter status make your voting transparent. It can also help you to see where your vote is going to count. and it simplifies it because we are so busy. We want to make sure that we provide time and opportunity for us to sit down and be able to vote accordingly. And voting can happen on your own schedule. So that really provides us with some sort of peace of mind. And I would also ask you, as parents, guardians of young people, show them that you're voting so that as they become older, they too can understand the importance of voting. Show them your ballot, show them the statewide election form, read it to them, go through it, and tell them the importance of why you are choosing to vote. I think it's so critical, and a lot of times we run through it, we don't talk with our children and our young people, and then we wonder why they aren't voting and why they aren't interested in the process. So please make sure that you run through those processes with your young people. So as you can tell, this is Sacramento. And I have a question for you. I want you in the chat to tell us who you believe is the California Secretary of State. Just throw it in there, drop it in the chat, tell us who you believe it may be. Because a lot of times people don't know. We don't know sometimes we don't even know who our local elected officials are. But this here is the person that's over the entire state of California, our Secretary of State. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to drop it in the chat to tell us who you believe is the Secretary of State. It's really important. It's really important because this person oversees our elections throughout the state of California. So I hope you got it right because it is none other than our own Dr. Shirley N. Weber. And she oversees registration results. She oversees transparency. They also publish the voter guide and monitors campaign finance. I believe that Ms. Angela spoke about that. And you can go to that website at sos.ca.gov and find out more information about her role and responsibility and the importance of this position to us as the fact that we have someone who is committed to making sure that the election process is clear and transparent and can answer those questions. So again, her office manages voter registration, certifies election results, and enforces campaign finance laws. And again, her website is here. And this is a site to check when you want official guidance, not rumors or social media posts. You can go there for your information. So in addition to that, trusted sources for reliable election information. So many times people are getting misinformation based upon what they see on social media or hear. And it's really important to understand where you can get reliable information. So in addition to the Secretary of State's office website, you can also go to vote411.org, which is a personalized ballot information. You can go to California Elections and Tools, My Voter Status, registertovote.ca.gov, and of course, our own League of Women Voters, the Eaton area chapter, as well as you can go to our Bawapa Hayward South chapter and statewide websites. And those are really important to have people and reliable information, verified sources that you can get information from, because it's nothing worse than getting information and then realizing after the fact that it's incorrect. And so we want to make sure that we go and do it smart and that we have the information we need to make the most reliable decisions for ourselves. We are not here to tell you what to vote for. We are trying to provide you with all the information, tools, and resources you can use to make the best choice. And then, so another thing about that is cross-checking information. Pause before you post or share. We know social media, there are so many different avenues by which people try and gather information quick and in a hurry. But have you ever seen election info online that wasn't true? And I know that most of us have. And so we want to make sure that we verify that information, again, on the official voter information guide. We want to check that from the Secretary of State. We want to compare it with at least 2 other credible outlets. And we want to avoid screenshots or images with no source or no date or nothing that does not tell you where that information is coming from. Think of it as a fact checking for your future. Every time you share accurate information, you help stop misinformation from spreading. And so we want to do that. We want to stress that with our young people, that when you go onto social media, everything you see and read may not be accurate, but there are sources by which we can gather information to make the best choice we can. And so again, we'll pause before you post or share. Vetting and red flags, ask and assess. One of the things I always stress to young people is who is behind the message? What's their motive? What's the evidence? And what's the evidence again? Because the information has to be critical. You want to make sure that campaign mailers and ads can be very persuasive, but they don't always tell the full story. So when you receive a flyer or see an ad online, social media, ask yourself, who paid for this message? What's their motive? And what's the evidence? And as I said here before, what's the evidence? What's the evidence? Make sure you gather the evidence to make sure you have credible information. Check the paid for by, which should be a section on a campaign material. It tells you who's funding it, and you can visit followthemoney.org or the Secretary of State's campaign disclosure portal to see how much has been raised and from whom. Being informed doesn't mean being skeptical of everything. It just means making decisions based on truth and not tactics. So there are, again, sources by which you can gather information. Make sure you have the correct choice. As I said, again, there are elected resources that we can get that information from. So stay informed, stay available. Democracy, again, is a team effort. You can do it. Evaluating your campaigns, again, as I mentioned before, looking beyond the slogans, read the fine print, ask yourself who's doing it. And the other thing I would say to yourself or say to you is stay involved. Get involved and stay active. Volunteering for a voter education drive, verifying information on your network, sharing it that's correct. You can also go to the voters with organizations like BOAPA or even the League of Women Voters, offer to help an elder neighbor complete their ballot information, offer to let them know that, hey, the ballots came out. Have you received it? If you haven't, let me help you and share information that I know about that's accurate, that you can gather information to make sure you're registered. It is really important building civic habits that last beyond the election day. We cannot wait until election day to begin to determine whether or not we're registered, whether or not the information is accurate. We've got time right now. So gather yourself this evening after this webinar and begin to look at the tools and resources that have been provided to you and make the most accurate decision for yourself as you begin the process of voting. One of the important things I always try to stress to people is we cannot afford to sit out. We have to participate in the process. If we don't vote, we're allowing other people to make choices for us. And so if our vote is our voice, when we don't use it, we lose it. And so it's really important to stress that. When we sit out, others make decisions for us. And voting is both a right and a responsibility. It's how we protect our families, our neighborhoods, and our future. Even if you think your single vote doesn't matter, remember, when communities like ours show up consistently, systems start to listen and shift. And so it's important that you show up whenever you can, get as much information as you can, share as much accurate information as you can, and make the best decision for you and your family and your community. Excuse me. So call to action. I always try to leave you with a call to action because I think it's important for you not only to listen and to gather the information, but to do something with the information. So as we said, ballots are being mailed out tomorrow. You may already receive yours by tomorrow. Fill it out early. Again, you should be receiving a statewide special election ballot certificate here that came in the mail. Look it over. Providing information that's accurate and effective for you is going to be your first level of defense. Return it or drop it off. And I would stress to you, encourage no less than 3 people to do the same. Whether that's one person in your household, someone at your job, someone in your neighborhood, someone that you meet at the post office, someone in the grocery store, the checker in the grocery store, the bagger in the grocery store. There are people that we can encounter every day that we can encourage to vote and to get the most accurate information. Together, we can make sure our voices are not just heard, but that are counted. And I will continue to encourage you to stay connected and stay engaged. Here again are some websites that you can go to along with the Secretary of State. And again, don't forget who the Secretary of State is, and get the information and make the best choice that you can. Because again, voting is our tool for progress. It ensures we are shaping the future, not just reacting to it. And together we can make sure our voices are not just heard, but that they're counted. And so I thank you for your time and your energy and the opportunity to continue to uplift us as community members and encourage us to make the best choices for ourselves, our families, and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And thank you again to all 3 of our expert speakers. It's been a delight to hear from all of you today. Shifting our spotlights and opening it back up. Thank you, Lonnie, for providing additional technical support. And folks on the call, you should be able to see some links that Lonnie posted in the Q&A section. If you're not able to see them, please let us know by hitting the chat or the Q&A section. In there are many of the links that our esteemed panelists have been sharing today. And so do take a look at that. And at this point, we'll move to our questions and answers, and I'll start with the questions that folks had sent in upon registration. And I'll just open it up to the panel to see who might like to start. So the first question was if there were any insights. It was touched on that redistricting is happening in other states at this time. And are there any additional insights regarding that that any of the panelists might want to respond to? Or any insights that could be shared?
So I'll just share that Texas and Missouri have already redistricted. Other states are looking at it. Ohio, Florida, Utah are in the process of mid-cycle redistricting. Other Democratic states are also discussing whether they should follow suit. Even New York is discussing trying to change their own redistricting process to be able to counter it. So this is part of the reason why I called it the redistricting wars of 2025, is this is quickly spreading across the whole US with different states trying to follow the request by President Trump to do mid-cycle redistricting, and then Democrats trying to counter Republican efforts.
Got it. Thank you. So I understand there's a question about the chat, and we can see Ms. Nettles, you encouraged folks to folks who may be registered to make sure that they don't just register, but that they do vote. And she appreciates the presentation. Thank you. Chats are going to the presenters. So it is working. It's just that's where it goes to. And then let's see. So the next question is, do we have a sense of how many seats are changing in the proposed map for California? And there is a link to that proposed map in the Q&A section.
Yeah, so I'll take a swing at this. So there are five seats that would change from Republican to Democrat if this proposal is enacted. And uh, again, that's the point of the proposal. So it's not hidden that that is the intent, and that is to counter what Texas has done, which is to shift similarly about five Dem seats to Republican.
Thank you. And are any of the districts intended to be larger than they are now, or is that population equity, or not equity, but equality piece still part of what is in the proposed maps?
So the population equality is required by the US Constitution. So the new maps do maintain population equality as they have to, but they are just changing the shape of the districts to accomplish different partisan goals.
Got it. Thank you. I'll bounce this particular question over to RocQuel. We got a question about how can folks collaborate to help get the vote out?
That's such a good question. I think one of the things I was just talking with some fellow members who are, first of all, have conversations with people because you would be amazed at who is connected to whom already. And one of the things I mentioned to some of our fellow members is a lot of times we are engaged or connected to other organizations already, right? And so if that's the case, then what you want to do is to take what you already know that you're working on or that a particular organization that you're connected to is working on and reach out to those other organizations and begin to do collaborations. I would say also last year, we were able to connect with another organization within our area, the Eden Rose Links, which then were talking about engagement. And then from there, Sarah reached out to us and we were able to then collaborate with the Eden League of Women Voters. So it is the ability to see beyond just the corner of what you're doing. And it makes it so much easier if you have other partners that are willing to partner with you to develop an actual campaign of some sort regarding voter engagement. So I would really stress reaching out to other organizations that you know about, even those that you may not be familiar with, asking them, are they doing a campaign? Are they willing to partner on that type of ability? Because the more you can partner, the larger the span of information can radiate to. And so that would be my recommendation for that. Reach out to the organizations you're already connected to, and then from there, find out what other people are doing and reach out to them.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for all of these answers. Are there um, are there any guarantees or any thoughts about the likelihood that the Independent Redistricting Commission would either be reinstated in California after the expiration if Prop 50 were to pass, or across the country? Is there a sense of sort of the future of independent redistricting?
Well, if it's part of the amendment, then it's a requirement to go back in 2030 to start the process in 2031. So to me, it looks like it's a requirement for us. Now, will the United States Congress take that hold and use our model, as we're called the golden model? It would be a very good progressive step towards equality and redistricting.
Thank you. And I think RocQuel and had a comment here, and then Nicolas.
I was just going to say that one of the things I want to continue to stress, as I said before, is make sure that you have accurate information. A lot of times we are living in some time now where things are moving very swiftly. It changes from day to day, hour to hour. And so information can also change. I would just continue to stress to make sure you're connecting with reputable organizations and websites that can provide you with the latest updated information as to what the changes may be and then what is going to happen in the future. At this point, I don't know how many of us actually know that, because it seems every day something is changing. But I would continue to stress to please reach out to the Secretary of State, as many of you put into the chat, Dr. Shirley Weber. Go to that website, find out what information you can, and then ask questions.
Thank you. And Nicolas, did you have a?
Yeah, kind of echoing what our prior panelists have said. So like Angelina said, the measure does revert power, complete power back to the independent commission after the 2030 elections. So starting in 2032, you'd have a new set of maps drawn by the commission, including for Congress. And as the other two panelists also mentioned, speculating as to what might happen in the future is difficult, but I'll at least share a few things. One is that right now, the last attempt at independent redistricting, it was the Republicans in Congress that blocked it. So we currently have a Republican Congress, so it seems unlikely that they're going to push for independent redistricting. Though I will say there is one Republican member of Congress, Kevin Kiley of Sacramento. He's losing his seat through this redistricting, and he has proposed a bill to ban mid-cycle redistricting. So it's not quite full independent commissions, but he would ban mid-cycle redistricting. That seems unlikely to gain traction since President Trump has called for the mid-cycle redistricting, but that's possibly one of the proposals out there currently. The other view would be, would the courts maybe change? It was a very close vote, 5-4, to permit partisan gerrymandering. But since that time, the courts have had more conservative appointees to the court, and so far it is broken down as a conservative appointees versus liberal appointees in terms of the voting pattern. So I would suspect, at least right now, the Supreme Court too is unlikely, at least in any near future, to reverse its opinion. So that's some informed near-term speculation, but like the panelists say, a lot can change in 4 years, so who knows?
Thank you very much. And as you all alluded, there's no crystal ball about the future, and the same is true for the voting, even with gerrymandering, um, uh, redistricting in various states. There's no guarantee of the outcome of those elections. Everybody still has their own vote, as you've all pointed out in your presentation. So lots of unknowns. One of the things that is known, one of the questions that comes up a lot, is why was the league neutral on Proposition 50? And I'll start this one. Angie, if you want to speak to this at all, you're welcome to. That the League of Women Voters has no position on Prop 50. You may have received mailers that quoted the past president of the league, and that testimony came from the legislative hearings, not the actual ballot measure itself. And this is a great moment to point out, as RocQuel was pointing, that if you look at the paid for by, it was not approved. Those mailings were not from the League of Women Voters. They were by coalition or other groups, and there was no approval of that information. And the league took a neutral position because in the state of California, the decision was made to let the voters decide. The league has a long history of advocating for fair redistricting, and part of that is making sure that voters get the opportunity to decide for themselves what needs to happen. Angie, or Angelina, anything else to add to that?
Well, I can ditto everything you said, but it is true that we have a neutral position at this time, and it is because of our advocacy and how we tend to, even though our positions are broad, we still depend on that position of having fair districts and redistricting through the census. So it kind of throws us off. And so how can we defend our position if we're going to say yes when or no, and our position stays firm of redistricting on the census time? And I believe that we endorsed Prop 11 in 2008. So it seems like we could cause that uh, discussion or confusion by promoting yes or no. And then there are lawsuits currently being in court. And so if we said, okay, yes, let's do it, then that would impact the progress of those lawsuits. So it's best to stay neutral at this point to for our voters to make their own decisions and wise decisions on whether they agree and to vote no if they don't agree. I think that's kind of my opinion. I hope it's a fair one that represents the league as being neutral.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I can say also that other states are taking their own positions in this redistricting wars, as Professor Heidorn said. It's yeah, people are making their choices. So one additional question: will the government shutdown affect the election? Any thoughts on that? Or not?
No,
Go ahead.
you should vote. Ballots are already are on their way. So California runs its own elections, so the shutdown will not affect your ability to vote. And I'd encourage everyone to vote using the tools that RocQuel explained for us.
Yes, I agree.
And
California.
I would also say to be mindful of the postal service and the fact that there could be some delays, and this is beyond just the shutdown. So that's why I'm encouraging you, and I did encourage you to please get your ballots done early and get them into the mail. Though they'll be postmarked, you still want to make sure that you get them in a timely fashion so that your ballot and your vote do count.
Thank you.
And Alameda is providing a lot of drop boxes, and there's 24-hour access. So if you're hesitant because of the shutdown and the post office is involved, then walk and drop it off at a drop box so that you know that it's going to be picked up.
Absolutely. And in the handout flyer link that's in the Q&A, there is a link to where all those drop boxes and vote centers are, as well as lots of other links, some of which our panelists spoke to as well. Okay. Are there any questions from our attendees today? Feel free to put your question in either the chat or the Q&A. And while we give that a moment, is there any additional information that our panelists would like to add while we're waiting to see if we have any questions from the audience? I'll start with you, Nicolas.
No, nothing more. Just to really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this important topic. I hope the attendees found it informational, and there's a lot more resources out there weighing this important decision before Californians.
Absolutely. And Angelina?
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed the presentations from the other panelists as well. And yes, thank you, Raquel, is it, for Follow the Money. I forgot to put that slide in. That's an excellent slide. And I always say it, but I didn't realize that the website does exist. So, and I thank you, Nicolas, for the gerrymandering lesson. Very excellent. So I do want to add that there is an 800 number for the official Dropbox locations. I can give that out if you wanted to put that in the chat. It's 1-800-834-6454. And it's in our sample ballot that is given out by our county registrar of voters.
Great. Can you say that one
Sarah,
more
could
time?
I?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, can you say that number one more time?
Sure. 1-800-834-6454 or acvote.alamedacountyca.org. But Alameda County Registrar of Voters has information as well, factual and truthful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If I may, just a quick thing, one of the attendees asked the question about would the federal shutdown affect things, and I interpreted that to mean like would California like cancel its election, which we definitely are not, and ballots are going out and you will vote, but really good point raised by the other panelists about the USPS, the Postal Service, which may be affected. So I would just encourage you, if you're coming down to the wire, if your ballot is postmarked by election day, it will be counted. The difficulty may be if the post office is shut down, you may not get that postmark if it's day off. So I'd encourage you either to vote earlier or go to a vote center, or if you do go to the post office, you may just want to ask to see them postmark your ballot in front of you so you know it's been postmarked. So long as your ballot is postmarked by election day, it will be counted. So just wanted to add that little additional amount to clarify regarding USPS, which I thought was a really good point by my co-panelists.
Terrific. Thank you. And before I go to RocQuel for final thoughts and wrap up, I do want to answer a couple questions that came in. Yes, this recording will be shared. If you registered to participate today, you will receive a link to the video. It will be on the League of Women Voters Eden Area YouTube channel. And also, we will share all the links that are part of today's presentation for that as well. And then, yes, Carolyn Darcy points out that you do not have to go to your neighborhood vote center. You can vote anywhere in Alameda County. And yes, so vote wherever is convenient for you. RocQuel, final. Oh, sorry. Before we do that, I just want to give a couple thank yous, if I may. So again, thank you so much to our esteemed panelists, to each of you for being here today, to all of our participants who are here, and to our our planning committee. In addition to some of our panelists, our planning committee included lots of people from around the state, and special thanks to Lani Yamido, Marcos Eisenberg, and Marian Handa, and Barbara Inatsugu, who had special efforts in making this all happen. And anybody I may have inadvertently missed, I apologize. Thank you to you too. Professor Johnson, any final thoughts and highlights?
So thank you so much for this opportunity to come on. Again, this is what partnership looks like. Someone asked that question about partnership. This is it. I would also thank you so much, Nicolas, for that excellent information regarding gerrymandering and the whole alike. I think that many people are unfamiliar. And again, it's so important to determine where we get our information from. Angela, again, thank you so much for the information you provided us in regards to the whole process of Prop 50 and the opportunity to know where we can get our information from, as well as where we can go ahead and begin to look at how does this impact us. I would remind people that you can vote in person, and that polls are going to be open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. And when they say 8 p.m., they mean 8 p.m., not 8:02, 8:05. So they will get behind the last person that they actually noticed when they said polls are closed, and that is it. So please be aware of that. Do not wait for the last minute. Get yourself to a poll if that's what you want to do, because some people in our community do want to do an actual in-person, and that I think that is okay. We are very fortunate to have opportunities to do different types of polling and elections. And so with this process, you can do it in mail. You can take it down to the post office. You can actually put it in the box where there are several different locations, and you can vote in person on the day of, but be mindful of the time frame of when that is. I would be remiss not to also talk about 10 things you can do to defend our democracy one-pager that a couple of our very distinguished members of our BWAPA chapter have created, and we are putting that up on our own website. And it just really talks about what we need to think about critically when we talk about the importance of not just voting, but in the whole essence of why we need to defend our own democracy. And the last thing I would say is we need to start talking with one another. And that means not only to our friends and our families, but to our neighbors, to those we work with, to the young people that you see, encouraging people to vote and encouraging people to look about their own advocacy process on how and why it's so important to connect to one another. It is in times like this that we do need to connect across bridges to other people that we may not necessarily speak with, but at the same time, we all have the want democracy to support one another. And so I would just continue to encourage you. There are opportunities for that coming up. Look for those on the websites of different organizations that are within your community. And so we just want to stress not who and how you should vote, but that you should vote. And so with that, I thank you for the opportunity that you've come on and you've listened and you stayed all the way almost to the end. Thank you so much. And if you didn't, or if you know of someone that wasn't able to join us, please reach out, send them the link of the Eaton League of Women Voters YouTube page, and because I'm going to do that. Several people I said they were not having an opportunity to join us this evening, but I am passing along the link so that they can be able to hear and share. And it's not anything uncommon to have what we call a listening party. So get with a couple of family members, your young people. If you're a teacher, show it to those in your classrooms. We need to make sure that we have accurate information out there, and this is that ability to do that. And so with that, thank you so much, everyone, for coming on. Thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity, and we look to continue to partner.